Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Just in Time Cafe's interactive session. I'm Elizabeth Swan, co-founder of the Just in Time Cafe. I'll be your moderator today, and today's interactive session is titled A Financial Services Lean Six Sigma Interactive Story, where you guess the solution. And our guest host today is Dodd Starbird. And let me tell you a little bit about Dodd.
Hi, folks.
Hey, Dodd. Dodd is the managing partner at Implementation Partners, LLC. Dodd has over 30 years of global business experience in leading business transformation efforts that consistently achieve exceptional results by integrating best-in-class business process, technology, and human change management skills with strategic business management and leadership. He is the author of two business books, The Joy of Lean, Transforming, Leading, and Sustaining a Culture of Engaged Team Performance, and Building Engaged Team Performance. Align your processes and people to achieve game-changing business results. Dodd is based in Atlanta, Georgia, and I have had the pleasure of working with Dodd many times, and it is a treat to have him here at the cafe. Welcome, Dodd.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And I'm going to actually date us a little bit. I think it's been like 20 years or something like that.
Oh, easily.
I know.
We've both been at it for, more than 30 on my part now. So, well, a few more housekeeping tips for you guys before we get started. This is interactive, so you are all on video, and you can speak up when Dodd asks for input. It's great to see your faces, so please put yourself on video. But there are, there's already 28 of us here today, and we'll probably have more. So if you could stay on mute in the meantime, that would be great. You can also feel free to make use of the chat area throughout the session if you have comments. You can also raise your digital hand if you've got questions. I'll keep an eye out for your hands, and then I'll interrupt Dodd and say, hey, we got a question. Videos of our webinars and interactive sessions are available for free. That is jitcafe.com. Simply check the webinar page for all past webinars and podcasts. We generally have them up by Monday after the Thursday session. You can also go to the website to find out what's coming. And I'll give you a quick peek at next month's webinar and our March episode of the podcast before we find out who's all joining us today. Our April 21st webinar is titled Hot Tips and Activities for Lean Facilitators to Increase Team Engagement with guest host Stephanie Hill. Stephanie's a veteran Lean Six Sigma consultant, and she's going to share some of her most successful facilitation techniques for both online and on-site sessions. I'll put the registration link into the chat momentarily. And in the March episode of our podcast, you can hear our interview with Lean transformational leader Pilar Zimmerman from Illumina, which is a multi-billion-dollar global life sciences company. She's the operational excellence manager at their San Diego site. So you get a peek into what's working for them. There's also the hot app review we do every time and some Q&A with our Lean community. So I'm going to post those into the chat for you in case you want to register or check that out after today. And then I want to hear, again, we've got a few of you of where you guys are from, but if you have, if you could type in the chat your first name and where you are dialing in from, it would be great to see some more of who's here. We've got Karen in New Jersey, welcome. And I'm not sure how to pronounce Etobicoke, but that is awesome. We have Mahesh from there. We've got Cindy from Des Moines, Daniel from Des Moines, Gus, Santiago, Chile, Dodd. We are totally international. And then we've got Kyle. Welcome, Kyle from Dubuque. We've got Bakul in Peoria, Tina from Ontario. We've got, let's see. We've got Tanya in Mississauga. I think that's how you say it. Drew in Toronto. Kelly. Welcome, Kelly from Tokyo, always making us fully global. And then Aaron in New Mexico, Rhonda, Wisconsin, Hugo in California. My goodness. Oh, hello, Robinson from San Francisco. Great to see you. And Aaron from UC San Diego. Wonderful. Okay. All right, Dodd. I think I've gotten my my sense of who is all with us today. And I am handing the baton to you.
Super. Well, thank you, Elizabeth, and certainly appreciate the chance to be with everyone here. I'm going to start by just talking through what we're going to talk about today. And then, like Elizabeth said, we're going to get very interactive here, and we're going to let everybody come off mute at once, which is probably going to be like herding cats, but we're going to try to give everybody a chance to participate through a case study where we tell you the story, we let you read and hear me, and then you get to interview me as if, kind of I'll tell you the story and you can ask questions and we can kind of solve the problem together that this team had. And I think it's going to illustrate a whole bunch of things, both about lean and about what we call engaged team performance. And we combine those into a single group of 4 words of lean engaged team performance. Because we'll explain a little bit more maybe later about why that works for us. But this will be a chance to actually listen to some principles and then apply those principles. And I'm guessing some of you may come with lots of experience in this, some of you may not, but some of this is fairly intuitive as well. Some of it's counterintuitive and some of it's fairly intuitive. And so I think everybody's going to be able to participate as we try to help identify how this team improved its processes and performance. I'm going to start though with just a comment about lean, and this is actually from an old survey that happened 15 years ago. Some companies doing lean are achieving their intended results, but a lot of them claim that they're not. And 2% of the companies surveyed in that survey back in 2007 that were doing lean were getting the benefits they wanted out of it. And one of the reasons I'd say for that is this point here, which is that some folks think that lean is just about waste reduction. And that's where it came from. It did come from waste reduction. The idea of lean was about not being wasteful. And so in a sense, this is very true. This is what Wikipedia says. If Wikipedia says it, it has to be true, right? It was on the internet. But really, we think that lean is something much more important than that. And I'd say it's a self-funding vehicle for taking a journey toward a culture of engaged team performance. And self-funding means it pays for itself by making you more efficient. But the end goal isn't just efficiency for efficiency's sake. It's for teamwork. It's for a culture of a team that works together to get all the work done. And I think we'll come back to this as we go. That's the theme that you'll see in what we're trying to achieve with this team. We're not just trying to make the process more efficient so that we can cut people or whatever. We're trying to make the process more efficient so that people have secure, rewarding, collaborative jobs that they enjoy coming to every day, because those people are going to be more productive and they're going to make more money for the company too. It's a win-win. It's not an either or. So hopefully that makes sense. The approach you're going to see here, therefore, to this lean approach on the left-hand side looks a lot like Lean Six Sigma. If you're familiar with Six Sigma, you'll see the define, measure, analyze, improve, control kind of methodology or thought process in classic process improvement. But at the end of that, what we usually do is we spend lots and lots of time, probably half of the effort of a project is on the right side of this slide, of creating a culture of performance, organizing the team such that the team can self-actualize around goals that meet the customer's needs, and then transition to not necessarily a self-led team, but a team that can manage its own workflow so that if the leader goes on vacation for a day or a week, the team basically runs itself. Now, you still have a leader, and you need a leader to develop people, coach people, kind of set the strategy, all those things. But the team doesn't need the leader to move people around all day, move work around all day, being tactically involved in the daily work, because the team learns how to manage its own daily performance. And so those are some of the things you're going to see in the ultimate solution. Finally, one other thing in terms of this overall process, we like to just create this single diagram. And most of this stuff is probably intuitive and makes sense. This is the last page before we get into the whole rest of this discussion is a story. So what we see is the blue boxes lining up to the customer. And the customer is the yellow smiley face. And what we expect first is to streamline the process to meet the customer needs. And then the team goal and customer needs arrows both point at that target. And what we're saying is you want to have team goals that are related to the customer needs, and you want to make sure the team knows that it needs to achieve those goals that achieve the customer needs. And then you got to provide the visible data and what we call collaborative norms, ways of working together, such that the individuals know how they're contributing to the team goal that meets the customer needs. And then you support that with proactive leadership and the right organization, infrastructure, technology, things like that. This all makes sense. This is just kind of common sense drawn into a cartoon. But that's what we try to achieve. And when we come back to it, you'll see many things that we did fit into different parts of this. We did things that fit into streamlining the process. We did things that fit into team goals. We did things to understand the customer needs and to make sure the team was actually meeting the customer needs. We created visual data and visual work that enabled the team to manage itself better. And we provided leadership and organization beneath that. So all those things, all these attributes are going to be shown in the solution that you'll see once we tell the story. So, I'll segue into the story. And this is the part where everybody gets to come off mute carefully, as long as you don't have 6 dogs barking in the background. Come off mute, and we're going to start talking through this. And I'm going to be acting as if I was the consultant there, which I was there for this story, but also so answering your questions as if you were the consultant trying to figure out what to do. So I'm going to tell you the story, and then you can ask me questions, and I'll try to explain why certain things happened or how certain things happened. By the way, this company I won't say the company's name out loud here. Some people from that company are here on this call. I see names that I know that are from that company. And the company agreed to share this in our first book, in the 2010 book called Building Engaged Team Performance. The story was embedded in that book. So you get to hear the story without having to buy the book, which is probably better here today. But that story was already published and embedded in the book. So at the time, in 2006, this team had something called the Group Proposal Services Department, which was a team of people that was a centralized team that created quotes for their field operation. So their field operation was selling various kinds of insurance. And this is group insurance. So if you're familiar with group insurance in the US market, these are plans that are sold to companies to provide to their employees, whether it's big companies or small companies that provide a health plan, a dental plan, a life insurance plan, disability products, other kinds of group plans for their employees. So the customer is really an employer who is buying that policy for their employees, and then the employees get to sign up for the policy. And so each of these 300 requests that they got every day for a quote was a different employer that wanted a quote to potentially buy one of these or multiple coverages for their employees. And so actually that's, if you imagine, that's a fairly large operation. And in 2006, they were, when I first met these folks, they were able to turn around those requests in about 2 days. And the team was fairly consistently able to meet that. But the reason they were contacting us was that they wanted to try to improve their process and performance, and they were worried about their next busy season because in their previous busy season, they had gotten behind and they had gotten backlogged. And the backlog created service problems for their customers that they wanted to make sure they didn't have again. So that makes sense. Now, my first question kind of at a high level for you is, have any of you ever seen another business that was backlogged? This is where you can tell a don't tell a long story. You can tell a short story. So a few thumbs up. For those of you who have, Michael, I saw you said something. If you've seen a business that's backlogged, without saying how you got there, what problems does it cause once you're backlogged? Could be anybody could answer. Once you have a business that's backlogged, once you have a process that has more than a week's worth of work piled up before you touch the thing that came in.
Scrambling for resources.
Scrambling for resources. So you're like, okay, I have backlog, therefore I need more resources. So I go and find resources. Do those resources know how to do the work? They might. Sometimes what we'll find, I'm kind of leading the witness here a little bit, but when I hear scrambling for resources, I find that we go and find people that can help. Maybe they're temporary resources, or we borrow them from somewhere else in the organization. And then we find we have to train them, which takes more time away from the people who actually know how to do the work to train people. Then if they're doing work that we're not sure they're doing right, what do we have to do after they do the work? Like the resources.
Rework.
Oh yeah, we have to do rework. We have to fix the problems that the temporary resources cause. Sometimes we have to check them. So sometimes we have people brought on board to help and we're training them and then we're checking them. And that takes more time than just doing the work. So we sometimes find that scramble for resources actually hurts you rather than helping you catch up. Okay, so that I'll take you down another road now. Once you get behind, what do the customers do? Once you're good and behind, like if they expected something to happen in 2 or 3 or 4 days and you're over 10 days, what does the customer start doing?
Shopping. Look for someone else.
They could be looking for someone else. That would be really bad. In this case, these were internal customers. These are kind of a captive customer. It's your own field sales team that's sending quotes to the quoting team to do quotes. So the customers can't really leave. But what do they start doing once you're not meeting their needs?
Grumble.
Escalating. Yeah.
Oh, escalations, right? They start grumbling. They start calling you to find out where it is. Escalations, or meaning they say, hey, can you put mine to the top of the queue? And then the people who are supposed to be doing the work spend more time answering questions about the work, about where it is, than actually doing the work. And then they have less time to get work done. And so they get less work done. And so the funny thing about backlog is it starts out as a little tiny snowball at the top of the hill, and it starts rolling down the hill till it becomes this giant avalanche. And then the people, even if they did have enough resources to keep up, even if the demand went away and they would be able to keep up, the fact that they're backlogged causes extra work that now they can't keep up. So the backlog feeds upon itself and causes a bigger and bigger problem. So sometimes when we hear a legend like this, where they say that they experienced a drop in their service levels, and we ask them why that was, and they said, oh, we just had way too much work to do, I don't always believe it. We always have to go look and see whether it was just a little snowball of backlog that caused an avalanche, or whether it was a real significant increase in demand that occurred. So we'll see in this story. So anyway, it's great. I appreciate the lead in, folks. I appreciate you cooperating with that. I'm going to start by telling you a little bit about the process. And there's a few slides like this where you have a lot to read. So I'll let you read it. Please read it. But then I'll try to explain it too. And so I'm going to explain the process. I'm not going to read each bullet, but I'm going to try to explain the process. And then we're going to draw a map of it so that you can see it better. But a request for quote comes in from a field office. And this was back in the day before things were done electronically on screens. But what they would do is they would print the request. And then they said standard requests go into a queue for processing the next day, and rush requests get done today. So the field office had the opportunity to prioritize something as a rush. The really funny thing when we asked them, we're talking to people about this work, they said that the ones that go into the next day are called tomorrow's work. It came in today, but it's tomorrow's work. The stuff that came in today with rush on it is today's work, plus anything that came in yesterday is really today's work. So they had a name for it. It was called tomorrow's work. The specialist, the person who's the knowledgeable person who knows how to do this work, would then prep a batch of quotes. Basically what they would do is they would look at the quotes that came in, and they would add information to the quotes. First, they check and make sure it's a new quote, because the team was only supposed to do new quotes. And then they would add key information. I'm not going to tell you too much about that key information, other than the fact I do it at a high level. So if you're selling, for example, a disability product, the price of that disability product might be different for if the company that's buying it is in the coal mining business versus the office business. You would think coal mining business might be a little more likely to have a disability. And so there's research that the company has to do around what kind of business the client is in. And that drives some of the pricing. So that's a pretty simple example of what they might have to look up. So then another specialist is going to review the quote and create a prep sheet. And the prep sheet was basically reading what the field office wanted and then putting that into the right parameters that would be entered into the quoting engine system. So there's a system that they would enter that data into. So the specialist creates a prep sheet, and it was actually in Microsoft Word. It was one of those fillable documents where it had drop downs and choices. And so you would select from a drop down list and things like that inside an MS Word template. Then that prep sheet would go to a data entry person, and the data entry person was a temporary employee that just knew how to enter the data from the prep sheet into the computer system. And the computer system was also called the GPS system, which is very confusing because people would talk about GPS and I didn't know if it was the department or the computer system. Hopefully they've renamed it since then. I don't know. Somebody could probably tell us. Then the temporary person who completed the quote would put it in an Outlook folder and then send a message to the field office to say your quote is ready. It's in the Outlook folder. And then the field office would pull it and deliver it. The field office is the salespeople. They would then deliver it to the client and then decide whether the client was going to buy that product or not. And then after the quote was entered into the system, the paperwork was sent to another team, and that team gathered data about, they were called post-tracking. And basically they were tracking when the quote came in, when it went out, what kind of quote it was, so into an access database that they use to be able to report on their metrics of their turnaround time and things like that. So that was the process. Anybody, and don't tell me how to solve the problem here or not, but anybody, when you first see this, do you have questions about this? Like when I first saw it, I had a few questions. Anybody's questions about the process here and looking at this?
Too many handoffs.
There's a lot of handoffs, aren't there? Yeah. Why do people put? Sorry, I'll keep that comment before. I think another person had a comment. Why do people put handoffs in the process? What's the reason for handoffs? I'm not sure what, Henry Ford didn't invent handoffs, but he popularized them. The whole idea of Henry Ford's handoffs of creating an assembly line was that you could teach one person how to do one job really well, and they would be more efficient at that job than doing the whole process. So that's, sometimes we hear because one person costs more than another, like this SSS, this specialist probably costs more than a CDE, a temporary employee. There's probably, in fact, it was probably a 10 or 20% difference in cost. Not a huge amount, but because by the time you're paying a temporary, you also have to pay the temporary company that supplied them and things like that. But a specialist was more expensive labor than a temporary employee. So handoffs are sometimes created for the best of reasons, but then when you step back and look at it, you realize it might be costing us some time too. We'll see that later. Other comments about the process or questions?
Yeah, what's the price for hard copies versus, you put, so then you've got the soft copies on the systems, and do you need to keep copies?
Yeah, so the post-tracking team kept the hard copies in a file cabinet kind of thing, file cabinets for all the paper that they were using. This was before they were imaging and indexing. I'm sure they're imaging and indexing it now. The funny thing is that, to your point, the completed quote is already in an Outlook folder. So the only reason you would keep the previous documentation is in case you wanted to go back and find, if we made a mistake and you wanted to go back and check the quote against the instructions or the request, you'd be able to see whether we made a mistake or something. So a lot of times, we keep a lot of information around just for those kind of purposes. And again, nowadays, I'm sure it's not so much paper. But the funny thing is, even though it's paperless, sometimes it takes just as much time to image and index a document as it does to print it. So I know we save paper and ink and stuff, but sometimes we're not really saving much time unless we intentionally design those imaging and indexing processes with some streamlining in them. Very interesting stuff. Okay, keep this in your mind, but we're going to show you a map of it later. So you don't have to understand it all completely. Just understand, yeah, lots of steps, different people touching things. When we first saw this, we had a few questions. The next thing we often do is try to make sure that we understand what the customer's needs are. And so this is on the left is a Pareto chart, as you might know, of the different kinds of errors that had occurred recently. And so they had different anecdotes about quality here going on. And I don't know if it's easy to read this on my screen. I can see it pretty well, but I have a big screen here. So this on the left, it says SSS, human error. Then it says CDE, human error. If you remember, the SSS is the specialist and the CDE is the data entry person. Then there was one called misinterpretation. My favorite one was called read your mind. And I was like, what in the world is a read your mind error? And they're like, well, they wanted to be Burger King. I remember this was like 20 years ago when Burger King had those ads about have it your way, if you're familiar with Burger King from 20 years ago. Some of you are too young for that. But the idea of a read your mind error was that if the instructions came in and it said, do this, but the office had a standing preference to also do other things, you were supposed to know what the standing preferences are. So for example, one office had a standing preference that if anybody wants any kind of quote for dental or health or long-term disability or whatever, they say always run a life quote also, because group life was a cheap thing that they wanted to offer to everybody. So there was a standing rule for that office of you're always going to run a life quote in addition to what I asked for. So if I asked for dental, you're going to run dental and life. Well, so what the people were saying, what the SSS was saying was, it's kind of hard to remember all this stuff. So what they did was they created something called a benefit map. And I don't remember exactly how many offices there were, but let's say there were 50 different field offices that this group of the centralized group supported, 50 little different field offices all over the country. And so each one of those field offices, they had created a benefit map to be able to know what that office wanted and what their preferences were. So it sounded kind of complicated, but the read your mind error was down here, meaning we didn't, for whatever reason, the thing they wanted wasn't on the benefit map. And then some of these other human errors where the SSS should have known it was on the benefit map, or they just made a mistake. So if we looked at the quality issues, there wasn't a huge, and you can count how many there were there. There weren't a lot of them. 155 of them or 159 of them or whatever that adds up to. There weren't a lot of quality issues in that previous period of time. And on the other hand, there were, there was plenty of discussion about what the customer wanted. This came to, from my story here, this came to one of the points that caused me probably the only disagreement I had with the department leader at the time. And the department leader said, we've been thinking about just getting rid of the benefit maps and telling them that we're only going to run certain kinds of quotes and everybody's going to get the same service. And I disparagingly called that vanilla quotes. I said, oh, you're going to do vanilla quotes. And then after saying the word vanilla quote maybe 2 or 3 times, the leader pulled me out of the office and said, stop saying that. This vanilla quote thing is making it sound bad. And what we're talking about doing is standardizing what we're going to give our customers. Think customers want standard? Think customers want standard? Well, sometimes they might. They might want to get what they expected, but often if the customer is used to having a few preferences or being able to give a few preferences, the customer doesn't want to hear that you're just going to give them a standard thing. They want to feel like they have some choice in the matter. And so what I asked her was, and again, this was a great friend of mine. Her name's Deb, great friend of mine. The only time I ever disagreed with her in 10 years that we worked together was this one time. And I said, just give me a chance. Give us a chance to figure out if we can give the customer what they want before you tell us that we're not going to give the customer what they want. So we always go in with the idea of let's figure out what the customer wants and figure out how to get it for them. And then if there's something that's too hard, maybe we charge for it, or whatever. In this case, they're internal customers, probably not going to charge them. But this whole idea of a vanilla quote and then saying that the benefit map was too hard to do was sort of a legend that people kept telling us, oh, it's so hard to keep all these benefits in mind. What do you think we asked for when we heard of this benefit map thing? What do you think we asked? I don't work there. It's my first time in the department. What do you think we asked for?
Why do you work here? What service do you deliver then?
What are you supposed to be delivering? Good. Well, great. I just asked, okay, show me a benefit map. I was expecting like a thick document or, they said this thing is so hard. Show me a benefit map. It's like a single page. It looked straightforward to me. I'm like, this doesn't look awful. They're like, yeah, well, it's not awful. Just different. Each office is different. So anyway, more of that story will come out as we go. Okay. So that was the customer, the voice of the customer. We didn't actually go talk to the customers, although some of them are here today, I think.
Dodd, how many offices were there?
I think somewhere around 50 at the time. I don't know for sure, but that's probably the right ballpark.
Thanks.
Yep. So I took that process map that we talked about before, and I made it into the rudimentary view here of a value stream map. And if you're familiar with a value stream map, usually you just put kind of high level processes and some information that goes in the boxes below. It's a classic lean tool. This isn't a full or a proper or complete value stream map. It's just got the information I chose to show you here. And we actually asked them, one of the things we like to ask initially in a project like this is, well, how long does this work take to do? What's the work time to do the work? And we knew the total time, right? They told us that most of the time we get it done in 2 days, 48 hours. That's 48 hours is not the work time. That's the total turnaround time. What's the work time to do one of these tasks? Well, it turned out that the work time was about 34 minutes. And what they said at the time when we first asked is they said it's about half an hour. So they were really close. They knew what their work time was. And the 34 minutes was actually, this was the coolest thing. Usually we like to run a time study when we first start a project like this so that we can verify the work time. They had already done a time study. They had done, I think they had, maybe 10 people go and do 5 quotes and write down the time it took to do each one. It wasn't exactly how we would do it, but and maybe it wasn't quite as accurate as what we would have liked, but it was great. It was wonderful information. And what we saw was that some quotes took longer to do than others. It had to do with different attributes of the quote. Were we just doing life, or was it disability? Disability was harder, whatever, some of those things. So different quotes took different amounts of time, and the average time for all the quotes was 34.4 minutes. The total turnaround time was 2 to 3 days. We could see how many people they had, different numbers of the SSSs, which again were the specialists. They were the more experienced people. You can add up all those numbers. I think the total added up to about 65 people here, doing a broad variety of things across all those processes. And actually, the step number 6, the tracking and quoting, those 4 people were in a different place. They were in a different part of the building. It was kind of it was interesting because the specialists work in this nice glass building. It's beautiful. It was almost brand new. And these CDEs that were doing the tracking were sort of in the basement. It was dark. It was kind of enclosed. There were filing cabinets around. It almost felt like a dungeon where you had the temps working in a dungeon and then all the other people got to work in the nice building. Not really saying anything bad about it, but it was interesting that the temps were in a spot where they didn't feel like they were being fully productive. Let's put it that way. And so when you see this map, does that make sense based on what we talked about before?
Don, one question from Heather. Since they had already completed the work time, you stated that was not how you would have liked to complete it. So what would be the more correct way and when?
Yeah, so it's so great. And I got to be careful. I'm not, casting stones. I've got to say it was wonderful to have them have done a time study ahead of time. So, and we used it. We didn't try to redo it because it was so good. So it was really good. If they don't study, what we like to do is to have people self-track their work. And we provide an Excel spreadsheet with drop downs on it. And we kind of set up that spreadsheet to be able to, for them to self-track their time for a while. And each person tracks the start and stop time of the tasks that they do. And you get a kind of an accurate view of what they were working on and how long it took to do each kind of work. So again, I got to make sure I'm being very careful to say that this was a really good one. It was great to have the data that they gave us at the beginning. Great question. So one of the things that we like to do with that time study is to do what we'll call the back of the napkin exercise. And so this is your first piece of math today. FTE, which is full-time equivalent number of people, that's what FTE stands for, number of people, equals volume times standard time divided by 5 hours a day, which is what the equation in kind of the top middle of this says. So this is hard to do sometimes because lots of times businesses have lots of different kinds of tasks they do, and you don't know what the standard time is, the average work time to do each task. In this case, they had one kind of task. They were doing quoting, and we knew a weighted average of 34 minutes that kind of matched what they thought, which was a half hour. And actually, when we were doing this back of the napkin, I was sitting in a restaurant with their department leader at lunch and just asking her, okay, so what do you really think this is? The staffing, the volume of work was 300 units a day, 300 quotes a day. And the standard time was a half hour per quote. We did this in hours, not in minutes. So quotes per day, 300 quotes per day times 0.5 hours per quote. Somebody's going to tell me if you're doing math. Actually, this violates one of my personal rules, which is don't do math in public. But this one's not hard, so I think I probably won't mess this up. So 150 hours of work per day had to occur in the whole department. Now, it doesn't include training and meetings and cake on the lawn and all the other stuff that goes on in the day. This is just the production work. So what we usually do is we assume 5 hours per paid person day is what they get. They work 8 hours, or you're paid to be here 8 hours. Some of that is personal time off, some of it's cake on the lawn, some of it's team meetings. We figure out of an 8 hours paid, you should get about 5 hours from a production team. So if we divide the 150 hours by 5, that makes 30 people. But the team, yep, thanks, Mahesh said 30. The team had 65 people. And as we were making this little back of the napkin math on the napkin, I wish I still had that napkin. The leader is sitting there realizing, I should have the capacity to keep up. I wonder why we don't. I wonder why we didn't in the prior busy season. So that's part of the story here, is that they actually had quite a bit of capacity. And if I go back a few steps and I look at where all the staffing are, you've got some SSSs that are doing training. You have some that are new trainees. You have some that are in quality assurance. You have some that are doing system projects or other things. They're working on other stuff. You would hope that during the busy season, we would pull some of those people back to just do work, as opposed to continuing to invest in all these other things during the busy season. But sometimes you don't have a choice. Sometimes somebody tells you, yeah, the system project, we have to get it in by a certain time or whatever. So we'll find out. That isn't exactly what happened here, but that could happen where you could have a group that's set up to be a sustainable size, and then to have some of that effort get siphoned away on other things so that you just barely have enough to get the work done. But we still, even here, we have 32 SSSs. You have 4 more that are delivering training. That's 36. Even if all these other things you couldn't stop doing, that's plus the other 11 CDEs down there on the bottom right. That's 47 people or something like that. It's way more than the 30 that the math would tell us. So we knew we had an opportunity here. Now, this is also a really good company. It's a really good company that doesn't want to just go around slashing people or anything like that. If they find opportunity through a project like this, they're going to move those people to other things and have other work get done or whatever. So this was a great company to work for because nobody was looking at this number like maybe only one person was doing that, and that person was one of their change leaders or one of their strategy people. But everybody else was looking at this like, hey, this is a great opportunity to get more work done. So we started talking to people about the process. We started asking questions. And I'm going to talk about this prepping thing. And before I do that, I'm going to go back to the process map and show you where prepping is. Prepping is number 2 on the process map. It says, prep batch of quotes and look up demographic information. This is information that they needed in order to do pricing. So a person, this is number 2, it's before the experienced person does evaluation, and it's prepping the document before it gets evaluated. So why did they prep? Well, a person says, prepping is helping without really helping. And I was like, say what? That sounds pretty cool. What does that mean? She says, well, I have to admit, what we do is we can't help each other because of those benefit maps, because each person has to know their own field office. We can't help each other by doing the quote. We can only help each other prep. So if somebody has 15 quotes today and I only have 5, I'm going to go help prep for them. So I'm going to pull some of their quotes and I'm going to do this prepping. That makes sense. Kind of, it's a handoff, but it makes sense. But then they said prepping is helping without really helping. I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, well, I have to admit that if somebody preps for me, I'm still going to check it. Well, what good did it do if they prepped for you and you checked it? Well, if they messed it up, then I'm responsible. So I'm going to check their work. You ever see this before? Where there's and somebody who mentioned the handoffs before. We have a lot of handoffs in the process. You would think it makes sense to have a cheap a resource that's cheaper in dollars per hour or whatever, do certain work. But if the next resource has to check what they did and they spend time doing that, we didn't really gain anything from the handoff. In fact, we might have lost time from the handoff. That's what was actually going on here. And so they said prepping is helping without really helping. Yeah, I check the things that someone else prepped for me anyway, so that prepping doesn't really help. And then the person says, well, what else could we help with? It's because of those darn benefit maps. Here we go, vanilla quotes again. I almost said it and I almost got myself in trouble. And if the offices would just standardize what they want, we'd be able to help each other with complete quotes. But it's so hard to learn each office's preferences that prepping is the only way we can help each other. When we heard that, what do you think we did? Anybody have an idea of what we did when we heard that?
Standardize the maps?
I'm sorry? Somebody said eliminate the prep process. Well, ask how to meet the office's needs more easily. Great. Yep. We ran, go ahead.
Just wondering if you went to study the benefit maps, like the differences between the.
Right. Yeah, we went and ran an experiment. We were like, okay, it's so hard to do this benefit map thing. Fine. Let's take a person that's never done field office 1, 2, 3 before and give them the benefit map. Give them a few quotes for field office 1, 2, 3, how they do. So we sat there and watched a person. We sat behind a person while she did it. And the first time she pulled out the benefit map and she pulled up the quote, she'd never done that office before. And she's like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm having to read the benefit map. I apologize, it's gonna be slow. She spent an extra 5 or 10 minutes doing it. Then the next time, the second quote, she was faster. By the third or fourth quote, she put the benefit map down and didn't need it anymore. And it was like, okay, so this whole thing about not being able to help each other is an urban legend. It's not true. And learning a benefit map was nowhere near as hard as people thought it was. Now, do you want to learn 50 of them? Probably not. But can you learn more than one? Probably so. And that's what we found by doing that experiment. It was interesting though, because you hear these things and you don't really know how hard it is until you go, like Elizabeth said, you go look at the benefit maps, like, it doesn't look that hard. And then you have somebody do it and they tell you, it's not really that hard. it was just it was something that they had all taken for granted. Maybe you've seen this in your processes where people just live with it because that's the way we've always done it, and they don't know to challenge it because they were told that it's this way. So it was interesting. Yes, eventually eliminating that prep process is a good idea because it doesn't actually help you. It actually just spends time doing something that somebody else is going to check. And maybe there is another way to help. Maybe I could just go do a whole quote for you. If I only have 5 to do and you have 15 today, I could just pull one of yours and just do it, which is what we think might be the right way to handle it. Then we asked, what about the CDEs and data entry? That template that the SSS fills out is exactly the same as the system the CDEs put it into. So I'm going to show you back. I'm going to go back on our map, back on our process map for a second. The template over here in number 4, I'm sorry, the template in number 3 that the SSS fills out is the exact same as the data in number 4 that the CDEs put into the system. So why in the world do you think that the SSSs would spend time filling out a Word template to hand it to a data entry person to put into the system? So here's the thing. None of these people at this company, it's a good company, none of them were bad at process improvement. There's a reason. There's always a reason. There's always a reason why somebody makes a process like this. And the reason was a very simple one. They said, oh, there was a good reason for that. Originally, the computer system, the GPS system, was too slow when they first fielded it. And so when an SSS was sitting there doing the work, the system would be spinning or crawling while they were ready to move on to the next thing. And it didn't make sense for that expensive person to be sitting there, waiting for the system so they could go to the next field and enter it. And so they realized that they could make this Word form and then they could have the CDE do the data entry later. It makes perfect sense in that situation. Until we asked the question, well, is the system still that bad? And somebody said, oh no, they fixed it a year ago. So they'd created a process that made sense at the time. Then the technology changed, but nobody went back to rationalize whether the process could change back. And even more fun, the SSSs didn't know how to operate their own computer system because they'd never used it. The CDEs had all used the system. And so the SSSs only knew how to use the Word template. So somebody said, we'd have to teach the SSS how to use the GPS computer system. We're like, what do you think we did? Let's go see how hard that is. So we gave an SSS the quote and said, you don't have to fill out the Word doc. You just have to put it into the system. And we let an SSS try that a few times. And they were like, oh, I love this. This is so much quicker. This is better than doing the job the old way. So similarly, there's another handoff in there that wasn't there for a bad reason, but it didn't need to be there anymore. Finally, we asked the question, what happened last fall? Tell me what the real story was. What happened last fall? They said, well, our volumes increased dramatically and the snowball started. We got behind. We had also just lost some people who were in the midst of training the people we hired to replace them. When folks are in training, we check 100% of their work. Other departments like to steal our people. So right before busy season, somebody allowed an internal transfer of a couple of people to leave this group that was about to be busy and move to another group at the same company. They weren't like hired away to a different company. It was an internal transfer. And because a lot of companies have these rules that are HR friendly around, hey, anytime you want to transfer, go ahead. You can apply for that job over there. And maybe there was an opportunity to negotiate a little bit to say, hey, don't do that to us right on top of our busy season. How about we give you that person a month from now or 2 months from now? That wasn't able to happen here. So they lost some people, and then actually training people and checking them takes more time than just doing the work for them. So you saw those trainers and all the number of the counts of people who are trainers and in training and all that. That's great when it's not busy season. When it's busy season, what you should do is stop training people, stop hiring people. If you get behind, don't hire people because it's just going to get you more behind. You have to figure out how to get out of being behind without hiring people, because the hiring people costs you more time than it saves you. That is totally counterintuitive. Makes no sense until you realize that the training was half the problem. The volume increase, listen to this one. The volume increase when we went back and measured it was 10%. 10% is enough to run 4 hours of overtime every week for every person and keep up. The volume increase wasn't the problem. It was the capacity problem that was caused by losing a few people at the same time the volume increase happened. And they had also started something called the quality quote process. And this was honestly how the meeting went. They were like, wasn't it about the time we started the quality quote process? And somebody said, yeah, that's true too. And of course, as the consultant, I've never heard of, I don't live there. I'm from out of town. My first question is, what's the quality quote process? And they said, well, instead of checking quality after stuff left the building, like a random quality check, which is what we normally aspire to do, they had this quality quote process where everybody would do a quote unquote fake quote. They were given a quote. They knew it was a quality quote, but it was a tricky one. So they'd be given one that they knew wasn't real. It was a tricky one. And their qual for the month was based on that, and their incentive plan was based on it. So if you were given a tricky quote to do, that your quality score for the month that your incentive plan was based on, would you do it quickly or would you take some time to do it right? They were spending hours on these quality quotes because their grade was based on it. And it was really not a quality thing. This is more of a training thing. This is really it was created by the training department. It wasn't a good idea, but the busy season was not a really good time to be launching that, because it caused people to spend time on something that wasn't even real production work, and to agonize over doing it right and to check it a few times. It took a number of person hours out of production right at the wrong time. Mm-hmm. So with all that, it says, go back and look at the process map and tell me what you think the team decided to do. What do you think they decided to do? Somebody said a minute ago, eliminate the prep process.
Yeah, I think Mahesh said that.
Yep. Tamara
No more
said,
cross-training?
ask how to meet.
I heard no more.
cross-training.
Yeah.
Good. You heard another one?
No, I was just making sure I didn't talk over the cross-training idea. Eliminating cross-training.
Gotcha. How much of this process could the SSS do on their own? You said eliminate, so cross-training would be how to do some other people's jobs, right? So we can, these people, they could prep and they could do the data, evaluating the quote, and we cross-train them into inputting the data. If you've already prepped and done the quote and inputted the data, how hard is it to transmit the quote to the customer?
So
Another lean concept out there called single piece flow. Just do one and get it done. If you're familiar with that.
Tanya, were you saying something?
yeah, I was going to say it becomes like a one-person job.
It becomes a one-person job. Yes, Tanya, very nicely done. We said, let's see if we can make it a one-person job. Actually, we said we were still going to print the quotes by office and sort them by due date, because we didn't have an electronic distribution system at the time. This was back in the old days. So there wasn't a workflow system to move the work around to the right people to do get next and pull the next one. So they said, yes, let's have one person evaluate the quote, transmit the quote to the customer, and even go into the Access database instead of sending it to the CDEs in the other part of the building. Just finish the whole thing by tracking it into the Access database, which means that SSS had to know how to do their job. They had to learn how to do the data entry into the GPS system, and they needed to learn how to do the MS Access tracking system. And we're like, okay, you're going to have to learn 3 systems. And people are like looking at us like, really? We're gonna have to learn 3 systems. And we let a small team try it. And the total work time was 25 minutes instead of 36 or 34, sorry, 25 instead of 34, which is a 27% reduction in work time. Because it's a single touch, there's no more queues, there's no more waiting in between queues. So the wait time got reduced too, because once I told it to do it, it was done. So a lot of things were getting done the same day. It was kind of a revolutionary change to the process. So that's the process piece. And you know, the tricky part here actually was that you don't. So it's going to sound funny, but you don't want to teach your racehorse to walk around the track. So from a team performance standpoint, what we did was we ran this briefly to just pilot it a couple of times before we tried to set a team doing it. And we got this pilot average of 25 minutes. And then we said, okay, let's have a team that covers, let's say 10 offices. Let's pull a team together of a few people, cover 10 offices, and try to get all that work done. And what we did was we did the math to say, okay, at 25 minutes, how many should they be able to do in a day on average? And how many people should need to be on the team in order to keep up? And so we actually created a pilot team. We put balloons up over their desks. We made a big fanfare out of it. We pushed more of the work through that pilot team than we normally, than their fair share. But it was based on this new 25 minutes. And so after a couple weeks, the pilot team is pulling half the department's volume. And other people are bored because there's no work to do. Maybe not half, but it was quite a bit of the department's volume.
You see the one
yeah.
from Mahesh?
Yep. Eliminating the word file process, exactly, and the data entry operators. Now, these temps weren't, nobody got fired. The temps, there were other things in other departments that we needed people to do. So everybody, we quickly moved during the transition. We moved a few of those temps off into other things. But yeah, we just didn't need anywhere near as many people anymore as we had there. And at the same time, we wanted to make sure we set up the busy season for success. So we made sure that we sized the team for the busy season, and that to be able to handle the busy season with appropriate overtime. And then we started attriting the rest of the team. And what we ended up doing is on the next page. We created 6 teams of 5 to 7 people. So you can do the math there and say it's not 65 people anymore. The team still had, each SSS still had a primary office that they were the relationship for, but on a team, each 5 to 7 person team that maybe covered 10 offices had to know more than one of the offices. So there's no more of this, my office, I only do my office and you only do your office. There were these benefit maps, and each team had 5 to 7 people that all knew how to do all 10 of their offices. And they were able to do what we'll call a client focused team by pulling a team together that all worked on the same group of clients. So a team of 5 to 7 people all worked on the same group of 10 offices. So those 5 to 7 people still got to know the offices pretty well and were able to give great service to the offices they supported. And there was a primary person, and then there was a few backups and things like that. So the team members basically got to manage their own day, getting all that work done, which was kind of cool. So that could be the end of the story. It was a process improvement and a reorganization. But after having done all that time study work, we were able to do a few other things that were kind of cool too. And this was it was a regression equation, if you're familiar with regression, that was based on the attributes of the product. And so this regression equation predicted the number of minutes that it took to do a specific type of quote. So you can see how this kind of spreadsheet looking thing is set up, where the coefficient in the equation, the 5.79 for medical is up there. It says 5.7 medical. It's actually, you think of it as times. So medical would take you an extra 6 minutes. Dental would take you an extra 3 minutes. Total lives is the number of people that the company that are being underwritten, that would be 0.22 minutes per life. So 25 people would take an extra 5 minutes. So basically give you a predictive equation that was actually really super accurate, not on a single case basis, but if you looked at a group of them, it became pretty accurate. And they were able to run quotes through their old, take the quotes from their old system that they had run before and predict how much time it should have taken to do each one. And they did that in order to create a staffing model so they could put the right number of people on the right teams. They could look at an office's quote volume and say, how much work is that and how many people do we need to cover that office? And so they were able to right size the teams based on all this math, which is really cool. So we're not going to do a lesson in regression or Lean Six Sigma statistics, but the math was really cool. And what it allowed them to do was to right size the team. And so with that, once you've right sized the team, you can set performance targets. And I want to digress a tiny bit here to go back to their original performance target wasn't a team goal. So if you've done the math to figure out how much work it is to keep up with the offices or with the work that you have coming in, the demand, you can set the right capacity to the demand. And then you can just tell the team to keep up. Your job is not to do 15 quotes a day. It's to do however many came in today as a team. And we're going to size you so that you can keep up. It's kind of a weird, it's flipping it around. Have you ever seen though teams that had kind of figured out the number of quotes we need to do and then assigned a goal to each individual? The original goal was 15 quotes per day. Have you ever seen something like that? Yeah, so Daniel says you can also get goals for sales throughput with quote to close ratios. Exactly. You can back into this goal for an individual. But what happens if you, so I like telling the team, your goal is to get, if you got 50 quotes in today, your goal is to get 50 quotes out today. That's the goal, to keep up with the work. If you then split that up into numbers of people, you could say each person's goal is 15 or each person's goal is 10. When you tell a person that their goal is 15 though, what do they do when they hit 15? Daniel was talking about salespeople. What happens if a salesperson hits their quota with a week left in the quarter? What did that salesperson do? They save those closes for next quarter so they can hit their goal. Yeah, they save the work. Yeah, or they, and Heather says they stop working. They don't do it on purpose. They're like, oh, it's 3 o'clock. I hit my goal. So I'm going to do some filing. I'm going to go look at a webinar. Oh, sorry, we're at a webinar. I'm going to do some other stuff that's not production work because I hit my production work goal. What happens? Remember though, that some of them were harder than others. Remember my little regression equation here? Some quotes are harder than others. What if I get a real hard one and I don't hit my goal? Is that because I'm a bad worker today? Nope, just because I got a hard one. What if I get a bunch of easy ones and finish by 2 o'clock? What should I do? Keep working. I should pull another one and do more, because if I got a bunch of easy ones, maybe somebody else got a hard one. It was funny. We had, I told a story to the team at the time of a time when I was in the Army long ago. And I had a soldier who left our unit and came back after going to the Special Forces qualification course. It's on TV. You see the qualification course where they beat them up. This was not Navy SEALs, but it's like the second hardest thing below Navy SEALs is the U.S. Army Special Forces course. And he was telling stories. And my favorite story that he told when he came back to get his stuff, because he had graduated and he was moving on to a special forces unit. My favorite story was the 10-mile run. They told these people, hey, we're going on a 10-mile run this morning. They all put their boots on. They don't run in sneakers. They put boots on and backpacks and whatever else, and they're going on a 10-mile run. And they got to the end of the 10 miles and there's a truck sitting there. And they told them, okay, as soon as you get on the truck, we're done with our 10-mile run. And they're like, cool, this is the best day ever. And the truck starts slowly pulling away. And they're just running behind the truck. They're not running too fast. They just have to keep up with the truck. The truck goes another 16 miles. And he said, we lost more people that day than any other event. And if you quit on one thing, you're done. You're thrown out of the course. He said, we lost more people on that one event than any other thing. He says, the funny thing though, is if they'd have just told us we were running a marathon, everybody would have made it. the goal isn't a place to hit, it's a place to stop. And so the idea of an individual goal is just often it's horrible because it causes it causes all kinds of bad behaviors unless the individual goal is right at the margin of effort, where if I just give a little more, I can hit it. And then people then try to ratchet up the goal next year a little bit more and a little bit more, as opposed to saying we have an individual standard and judging it by the team score. That's what Mahesh just said, judge it by the team score, not by the standard. I'm sorry, not by the goal. And then Tina says it could create a cherry picking behavior. Yeah. So the cool thing we did was, if you can use the time study on this particular page to measure the time it takes to do the work, you can give time credit. You can give more credit for harder work. If I have more of these attributes of the quote, if I had to do dental and medical, I earn more time credit. But if you're just counting quotes, that doesn't work. What we ended up doing was we started using standard time as the credit mechanism, not for the purpose of holding people accountable so much as just by predicting whether we got enough work done today. But then if you do need to hold somebody accountable, you can say, hey, this time credit is based on the work completed, and the complexity drives the time credit. So you don't have to set a raw number of 15 quotes. You can say, hey, I'm going to take every piece of work that got done and I'm going to by standard time, and I'm going to hold that up and I'm going to see if it fits or not. And so that's what they did on this chart. The blue line was the actual time spent, and the pink line is the time that the equation predicted for the whole team, not for an individual, but for the whole team. So you can see that the equation is eerily predictive. And it was very, very helpful for making sure we staffed each team right for the offices that they were covering. And then if volumes changed, we could say, this team needs a little help, or we need to move some work in, or we need to move some work out, or we need to add a person here, or we need to work some overtime. Or if it wasn't, if it's possible that the team wasn't being efficient, we could usually see a gap starting to develop between the pink and the blue. And often when we hired new people that brought a new person on, there'd be a little gap, and then the gap would close up in a few weeks as that new person got to know what they're doing. They had all kinds of cool data now to be able to combine that regression equation and the completion credit into some time credit that they used for performance tracking, performance management, staffing models, all that stuff. And they, so they had combined the team, combined the work into single piece flow. They had right-sized the teams to be able to cover these offices. And then the last thing they did was around those collaborative norms that we might have talked about a little bit before. They created work areas where the team could all collaborate, because these 5 to 7 people had to share the same offices. They had to pull work out of the bins, and you wanted to make sure that all the work got done every day. So you wanted these folks to collaborate. So they created these little huddle areas with you could see the whiteboard behind the person with the black shirt on. There were the team was huddling around and talking. And eventually, yes, they did replace the work bins with electronic image and workflow, as opposed to pulling things out of work bins with paper. So yeah, they eventually made that change. One of the coolest things with this team, as we kind of wrap up what we did with them, one of the coolest things was we came back a couple years later to that same team, because we were working with a new team and at the same company, and we toured them through this this team just to see what it felt like at the end of a project. And the person giving the tour says, well, I end up spending a half hour every morning doing this data to show the team, the whiteboard data, to show them how much work there is to do today, to show them what we accomplished yesterday, and to show them the productivity. And a person in the audience, another leader at the same company, is like, I would never have enough time to do that. And it was funny. I was like, uh-oh, here we go. We're going to go off the rails. But then the tour guide, the leader of this business, says, after that, I don't have to do anything. I don't have to check anything. I don't have to move people around. I don't have to push people to get the work done. The team knows they have to get the work done every day. They know how much work there is to do. They just go do it. And they collaborate with each other. And it was funny because that team leader, her name was Julie at the time, she was also, during that tour, she said, I have to admit that I originally was just a bunch of BS when we first did it. And I remember that we had this person who was able to hit her individual goal every day. And she was a really good person. And I remember another person that I was about to fire. And she says, the funny thing is, once we did the math on this standard time stuff and this these are regression equations, the person that I was about to fire actually was getting an unfair draw of harder work. She was getting tasks that had more of these attributes or more lives. And I didn't know that. Nobody knew it. Nobody knew that this person was getting harder work. And she said, yeah, she sat there in the corner over there at her desk with their headphones on all day, and she didn't interact with anybody. And so I thought, she wasn't really keeping up with the work, and she wasn't interacting with anybody. And she's like, I later realized that she was there with her headphones on because she was working. She was trying to get all this work done that we had assigned her. And it turned out that once you actually did the math on what she was accomplishing every day, it was double the credit of some of the other people in the department. And it was funny because Julie said we almost fired the best, most productive person on the team because we were just counting things instead of looking at the complexity of the work. We didn't have a way of knowing. And it was really interesting. So the idea here, to kind of summarize before we open up for some more questions, the idea here is, find some way, if you get in a backlog situation, find some ways to reduce handoffs or non-value added work, take steps out of the process, use that freed up capacity to keep up with the incoming work or to pilot something where a team has a whole bunch of fresh work to do and just see how much they can get done, because that reduces the escalations. Even if it's counterintuitive, don't hire people when you're in your busy season because you have to train them and check them. So as much as you might like to get out of it by hiring more resources, get out of it by focusing the team on performance, by reducing those handoffs and then getting the team to get as much work done as it can, and create that team goal for keeping up. And then try to get the workout, sort of in a first touch, get it done in one touch, get it in and get it out. And the way to do that is by doing the in good order work. Don't spend time chasing stuff that's not in good order. Nicely ask. If somebody sends you something that's incomplete, nicely ask for it. Spend chasing your customers around. Work on the in good order work and train your customers that if they send it to you in good order, you're going to knock it out quickly. That's the best way to get more stuff in good order. And then finally, create an intolerance for backlog. Teach the team that keeping up make their lives happy and not keeping up is horrible, and it's horrible for everyone. It's horrible for the customer and for the team. So just create this culture of intolerance of backlog. And so those were the principles that we tried to apply here. You can go back and think about what we did. Yeah, we had to measure and analyze the process. We had to streamline the process. We had to create visible work and visible data to help the team see whether it was keeping up or not. And then we had to reorganize and set team goals and try to create control measures like you saw for sustaining performance. And yeah, it all fits into this same framework that we talked about. Streamline process, line up with the customer. Customer has team goals that line up with the customer's needs. Didn't need to change the customer. Remember, we didn't need to do vanilla quotes. We just needed to prove to ourselves that we could meet the customer's needs, and then create visible work and data that help the team make sure that they're getting the right amount of the right work done every day. And so basically that's what we did. I'm now able to, in the space of 15 minutes, take as many more questions as you have. But while we're doing that, we'll put this final page up, and Elizabeth put this into the chat as well. So if you want to click on that link, the first one that says contact, if you want a chance to win one of the 3 books that we're going to send out, The Joy of Lean, we're going to give away 3 signed copies. So if you put your name in the contact area of our website, we'll be able to, by any time today, you don't have to do it right this moment, we give a copy of Lean, 3 different people today. And by putting your name into the contact, here's this fine print, you're signing up to receive our bi-monthly newsletter, unless you say opt out, in which case you won't have to receive a newsletter. We're not going to spam you. We send it every couple of months, so it's not really spamming you. But if you don't want to get a newsletter, you can opt out, and we still give you a chance to win the book. So the newsletters are all archived at that other link in case you want to see what kind of newsletters we talk about. So with that, what questions or comments, you can be off of mute, just, talk. If you have questions or comments, you don't have to put it in the chat.
I saw some comments. I'm not sure if you saw them. Tina said she'd seen it before. She need to ask folks what work they're doing. And then Shane mentioned workload leveling.
I've seen this before. We've been talking about this kind of data, keeping track of the time credit based on a regression equation, something like that. Is that what you had seen before, Tina?
Yeah, it was a case of some registration desks, and people were being frustrated with that one person who was just slower. And then when they finally sat down to check to see what kind of work they were doing, the kind of work they were doing took longer because it had extra steps. So, just getting people to slow down and to take a look to see what they're doing instead of the assumptions, the people management side instead of the process management side.
Right. Good for you. And not all work is the same, and therefore not all goals are the same. And if you just set a count goal, you're going to get some people stopping early in the day and other people failing when they're some of your best people. So yeah, absolutely. What else? Other comments?
Mahesh has to go, but thanks you.
Yep. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
Any other comments?
We got Scott.
Hey, Dodd. Thanks, Elizabeth. Great presentation. Thanks for sharing that. I think it was awesome how you engaged the team and got people on board. What was the atmosphere in terms of how busy people were and their ability to engage, and how did you kind of work through that in the initial phases?
Yeah, it's a great question. We got lucky on this one because they called us in at a time that wasn't the busy time. They lived through the busy time, and they called us in at a time that wasn't the busy time. And so we had a chance to kind of go through the steps appropriately, study the work appropriately, pull a team together that had different people of different roles on it, so that they're not just leaders, people who actually did this work, so that we could have a core team of people that represented some of the roles or all the roles, but not all 60 people. A few people of each type of role to come and form a core team. So we had time to quote unquote do this right, because it wasn't the busy season yet, and they had time to dedicate to projects like that. There's another project, actually one going on right now, where we're helping a company with some backlog, and they didn't have the luxury of slowing down because they're very busy with that, because they're backlogged. So with that one, we actually avoided pulling processors off the line, and we grabbed people who are either trainers or specialists of different types, quality specialists, people like that, to represent some of the work for us. And then we engaged the people through the frontline people who are actually doing the production work. We engaged them through communication as we were trying to change some things. And what we quickly did was again, I'll go back to this one. With the new one that is backlogged right now and doesn't have time to actually dedicate processors to a project because they have to be processing because they're backlogged. We found some quick ways by studying the work to reduce handoffs and reduce work. We actually reduced some checking work, that they had some peer checking where some people were checking other people. And we did some statistical analysis that made us comfortable in changing some of the checking frequencies, which lightened the workload. So once you've lightened the workload, you can free up some capacity quickly. And people start to feel that positivity. So I think most people were positive about that project because they started to feel that it was helping them get their work done. But I think these principles are pretty right on, that you got to find some way to alleviate the pressure before you can ask people to do more.
Yeah, great, thank you.
Good question. Thanks, Scott.
Yep. What else?
Anybody else with a question for Dodd? You're welcome, Elizabeth. Thanks for joining.
Honor. All right. Well, I will kind of turn it back over to Elizabeth then, and we ended a few minutes early, but if anybody else has questions, they can be covered under my limited lifetime warranty, and that I have a limited lifetime, but if you send me the question before it's over, I will try to answer it.
And Dodd's good for it for now. I would back him up on that. This is this is a great, Kate, you're so good at this. I mean, pulling this together to teach it and to talk about it. So I really appreciate it. And you guys, this will all be up on our website, this recording, so you can see the flow and go back and look at materials and how they kind of built the understanding of this case, which is great. It reminds me a little bit of the work we did at Starwood Dodd. Remember that case study? And it was about how long it took to clean a room. And there was an assumption about how long it took to clean a room. And that wasn't necessarily right.
I could tell that story. I remember it was right after this. So it was after this case study. Elizabeth and I were working at a hotel company, and we were interviewing a leader who said, we were creating a case study for them to use for training about cleaning rooms and cleaning a hotel room. And so I asked the leader, so how long does it take to clean a room? He's like, 32 minutes. Like, 32 minutes. How'd you come up with 32 minutes? He's like, well, no lie. This is what he said. He said, well, there's 480 minutes in an 8-hour workday, and people get 15 rooms cleaned per day, and 480 divided by 15 is 32. So that's how long it takes to clean a room. And I'm like, dude, have you ever sat outside your hotel room while somebody's cleaning it? Because it doesn't take 32 minutes to clean a room. It probably takes 12 or 13. I mean, I'm a consultant. I stay in hotels all the time. 12 or 13 minutes to clean a room. If there was a really big party in there, maybe 30. But I don't see 32 minutes to clean a room. So it was like the goal had created the standard time instead of going to measure the standard time. What I think was funny about that, Elizabeth, is we used it as a case study, and then they actually went and did the project because the case study made so much sense that they did a project after the case study.
And they ended up
made a fake case study.
But it had an impact. And not all properties, but a lot of properties had something called pay per credit that came out of that, which was, get this many rooms cleaned, that's considered a day of work. And if you got it done early and your quality scores were good, you couldn't just be random about this. And you need to get a kid early from daycare, fine, do what you need to do. And then work more rooms, until it, quit in time, get credit for that, or keep working rooms. So they always had, the bad thing is you show up for your room at a hotel and they say, I'm sorry, your room's not ready. Right. So that for the customer side. So this meant they always had rooms ready, right? They were constantly ahead of the game, and people had flexibility in their work schedule, and rooms were getting cleaned, and they stopped, and overtime went way down. So it was just really fascinating when they looked at what does it really take to clean a room.
Well, one thing I will say, and I know a few people have dropped off already, but one thing I will say just to wrap up on that case study is that it was really brave of them to do what they did to improve their process. It was brave of them to let us publish it in our book. They weren't a bad business. They're a good business, and good businesses have those kinds of opportunities in them. They weren't doing anything wrong. They're a good business, and they just had an opportunity to be better.
Well said, Dodd. And thanks again for pulling this together and presenting it here. Everybody, it will be on the website by Monday. And I will say goodbye to you, Dodd. Goodbye, Robinson. Goodbye, gang. And we'll see you next month, hopefully.